Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating cybersecurity analysis that is literally going to change how you look at data breaches. Whenever we hear about some massive national database incident, our minds instantly go to hackers in dark hoodies, right? Smashing through firewalls and writing malicious code. But what happens when the real threat isn't an outsider breaking in at all, but a trusted insider who already has the keys? We're digging into a really sharp, independent gap analysis by information security professional Moses Gabriel Omolaye. He took a hard look at a public press statement from Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission regarding an alleged database misuse. By mapping their public response right up against actual data protection laws, we are going to completely separate the illusion of security from the harsh reality of the incident.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're breaking this teardown into 5 clear parts today. First, the incident and the illusion. Second, keys versus permission. Third, catching the insider threat. Fourth, the data protection problem. And finally, a roadmap to remediation.
Section 1. The Incident and Illusion.
Let's look at the official narrative that was fed to the public. So when the news broke that a prominent candidate's voter record had been leaked online, the organization obviously released a statement to manage the fallout. And as the analyst notes, this works incredibly well as crisis communication. It's a classic defensive stance built around one very specific claim: no external breach, no hacking, and no unauthorized external access. See what they did there? That framing is completely designed to calm everyone down. It's basically saying, hey, don't panic, our walls are totally secure, the bad guys didn't get in.
But here's the million-dollar question. Does no hackers actually mean no breach? Well, this is exactly where that illusion starts to completely fracture. Because what that official statement actually describes is a classic textbook insider incident. Someone with validly assigned credentials logged into the system, pulled a specific voter's record that had absolutely nothing to do with their actual job duties, and pushed it out to the public without authority. In the real world of national identity datasets, an insider going rogue with their access is usually a much bigger problem than some outsider trying to break in.
Now, to further reassure the public, the statement leaned really heavily on a massive number, specifically pointing out that the data of over 90 million voters was not compromised. 90 million! Sounds great, right? But as this gap analysis brilliantly points out, this is exactly the wrong kind of comfort to offer. Throwing out that 90 million number only tells us how big the breach wasn't. It does absolutely zero to change the reality that one specific identifiable person's data was unlawfully exposed. Minimizing the whole thing by pointing to all the people who weren't affected, that completely ignores the actual victim of the incident.
Section 2. Keys versus permission.
Now, what's really interesting about this part is how the official narrative completely blurs two very different technical concepts. On one hand, you have authentication. This just means you typed in the right password, right? The system recognized your valid credentials. Cool. But then, on the other hand, you have authorization. This means you actually have a legitimate need-to-know business reason to look at that specific piece of data. Valid credentials only prove the system knew who was logging in. They say absolutely nothing about whether that user actually had permission to go snooping around in a high-profile candidate's private record.
The analyst frames this beautifully as a massive failure of ISO/ISC 27001 Annex A controls, specifically around access restrictions. Let's just think of it using this key versus safe analogy. Having a valid key to get through the front door of an office building doesn't magically give you permission to walk the halls and crack open every single private safe inside. A registration officer working on the database should only see the applicants they are actively processing right then and there. They shouldn't be able to just freely search and pull records for anyone in the entire country. So yes, the access was authenticated, but it was absolutely not authorized.
Section 3. Catching the insider threat.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer breadth of the problem. The independent professional identified 10 distinct gaps in that public statement and grouped them into 3 digestible themes. We've got technical flaws, like the fact that detection only happened after the damage was done, people and insider risks, highlighting incredibly vague accountability, and legal failures concerning totally missing regulatory notifications. Let's break down those technical and people flaws first. So, giving credit where it's absolutely due, the system's audit trail did eventually work. It traced the account, but literally everything else described in that public statement is a reactive detection failure.
It all happened way after the event. There were 0 real-time anomaly alerts that would, flag someone doing a highly unusual, completely out-of-workflow lookup for a famous person. On top of that, there were no data leakage prevention controls to stop the user from just screenshotting or exporting the data. The system only noticed the damage once it was literally posted online, which means the technical controls completely failed to actually reduce the harm in real time.
Then there's this wildly concerning detail just hidden in the wording of the statement. It mentions identifying the user account, but then it talks about questioning relevant personnel, plural. That vague phrasing implies a massive, massive insider risk. We're talking about the potential use of shared or generic accounts. Guys, if you have a sensitive national database, every single privileged action must be strictly tied to one unique named individual. If you've got multiple people sharing a single login, your individual accountability vanishes instantly. It makes it incredibly difficult to definitively prove who actually leaked the data.
Section 4. The data protection problem.
So the crucial point here comes straight from the Nigeria Data Protection Act of 2023. Under the NDPA, an unauthorized disclosure of someone's personal data is a reportable breach, period, full stop. The law frankly does not care whether the breach was caused by some anonymous hacker halfway across the world or an employee sitting right there inside the building. So the organization's repeated defense that, hey, it wasn't an external hack, simply does not get them off the hook legally. A breach occurred, the law applies.
Because of this legal reality, the analyst points out a rather shocking absence of evidence in the public statement when it comes to compliance. There is absolutely zero mention of the Nigeria Data Protection Commission, the main regulatory body. There's no evidence presented that a mandatory 72-hour breach notification even took place. And honestly, perhaps most alarmingly of all, there is no mention of notifying or supporting the actual data subject, the specific candidate whose record was exposed. One identifiable human being was harmed here, and they are just completely ignored in the crisis response.
And all of this leads to a frankly absurd contradiction in their crisis communication. The statement literally asks the public to disregard unfounded speculations. Yet, in the exact same breath, they confirm that a voter's record was accessed and released without authority. I mean, you can't really call speculation unfounded when you are actively confirming that the event actually happened. It shows a really defensive, minimizing tone that just completely lacks transparency for both the actual victim and the wider public.
Section 5. A roadmap to remediation. Let's move on and see how this builds, because criticizing a response is one thing, right? But how do we actually fix it? The analyst built a totally practical, chronological roadmap to true security here. In the immediate 0 to 30 days, the priority is all about containment. You notify the regulator and the victim, suspend those compromised credentials, and get an independent forensic review going. Looking at the short term, like 1 to 3 months, they absolutely must enforce least privilege access, so users only see exactly what they need to, and deploy real-time anomaly alerts. Finally, in that 3 to 12-month window, the organization needs to implement just-in-time access that expires automatically, and build a formal insider threat awareness and disciplinary program for all staff.
To wrap up this entire analysis, the professional reviewer offers a really powerful closing thought. Build the response around authorization, monitoring, and data protection rather than the absence of an outside attacker. Bragging that you weren't hacked is completely meaningless if your own trusted systems allow data to just walk right out the front door. Focusing solely on external hackers creates this false sense of security that ultimately leaves real people and their highly sensitive data completely vulnerable. It's a fundamental shift in how we need to view data security. And it leaves us with this absolutely crucial question to ask about our own systems. If a trusted insider misuses your data tomorrow, will your organization actually be prepared to detect and contain it? Or will they just point at the locked front door and say, nothing is wrong? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking the hard questions, and I'll catch you next time.